Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti. I am MrPhotographer.com. In this video series, I'm going over all the different menu settings found in the Nikon Z6. Most of these settings also apply to the Nikon Z7. In our first episode, I went through all the settings found in the photo shooting menu. And in our last episode, I jumped down to the custom setting menu and I covered all the settings found in the A, B, and C sections of that menu. In this video, I'm going to finish off this menu by going over the settings found in the D, E, F, and G sections. And we're going to jump right into it. We're going to start off with D, shooting display. The first is the continuous low mode shooting speed. This is when you're in continuous low mode. How fast do you want the shutter to chug along and take images? You could go as slow as 1 frame per second or up to 5 frames. I have mine set to 5 frames. Maximum continuous release. This is if you press the shutter button when you're in a continuous shooting mode, how many images in a row do you want it to take before it stops? Nikon limits you to 200 images. The reason for that is you may accidentally leave the camera on, stuff it in a camera bag, and it may press on the shutter and fire off a couple thousand images and burn out the shutter. So they limit you to 200. You could also limit it even lower than that if you'd like. So if you find you're often accidentally pressing that shutter button when you're in continuous mode, put it in on a lower number. Next is sync release mode operations. This is if you're using multiple cameras. Do you want one shutter on one camera to control the shutters on all the other cameras? You could have it set to on, sync, or off, no sync. In this case, I really don't have multiple Nikon Z6s, so it doesn't apply to me. Exposure delay mode. This is after you press the shutter. How long do you want it to wait before it actually takes the image? Most of us have that set to off. But if you're doing something like macro photography and you don't have a remote cable release or anything like that, you may want to set this to something like 3 seconds. That way you could press the shutter and the camera will not take the image for 3 whole seconds. And then any micro vibrations you induce by pressing the shutter will hopefully calm down within that 3-second period and give you a steadier shot. Electronic front curtain shutter, you would use this to really get a steady shot. But if you have this enabled, it will limit some of your ISO settings and some of your shutter speeds. So it's limiting in some manner, but it will give you maximize your ability to get a steady shot. I have it disabled. Most often you'd have that disabled. Limit selectable image area. This is when you're going through a submenu looking for the size image you want to shoot. Do you want all the choices showing? By default, FX can't be turned off, but you could turn off the other 3, DX 1:1 and 16:9. And to do that, you would just hit the right arrow key on the back of the camera to toggle it on and off. I have them all available. Next is file number sequence. As you know, when you take a picture, each image gets a number, and you increment the number as you go. If you change memory cards, do you want to continue that numbering, or do you want to reset the new memory card back to number 1? If you have it on, then you're going to continue the numbering. So if I'm on one memory card and I'm shooting image number 4000, and I put in a new memory card, since I have this on, the next image shot on the new memory card is 4001. If I had it set to off, the next image shot on the new memory card would be set to 1. And you could reset the numbering right here with the reset button. That will reset all the numbering back to 1. Apply settings to live view. This is very important actually. If you're shooting and you're in live view mode, when you have this on, whatever your camera is set at, the ISO, the aperture, the shutter speed, the actual look that you'll see on live view will be the exposure. So it's going to look like it looks. So if your image is underexposed, it's going to look underexposed on the screen. If it's overexposed, it's going to look overexposed on the screen. So this normally you'd have set on. Why you might want to have this off is if you're using off-camera flash or a non-Nikon flash, and you are, let's say, in a dark room, but you have it set to flash sync speed of 1/200th of a second. You have it set to, let's say, aperture of f11 and ISO 100. The back live view will look really dark because you have it set. They have this setting set to on. If you put it to off, then it's going to give you the scene on the live view so you could actually see it. It's not going to be your real exposure though. And you most often will want to put this off when you're using off-camera flash. Next is framing grid display. So in the frame, on the back of the camera or in through the viewfinder, do you want that grid on? I have it set to on. Peaking highlights. When you're in manual focus mode, you're manually focused on something. The edges, you could have them get like a little bit of a line on it to let you know you're in focus. And how sensitive do you want it? I have it set to standard. You could also turn it off here. And then what color do you want it to be? You have 4 choices. I found, for me, that I could see yellow better than the other 3 choices. So that's why I have mine set to yellow. So when I'm manually focusing and when that object's in focus, the edges will kind of get a glowing yellow edging to them, and I know it's in focus then. Next is view all in continuous mode. When you're in one of the high-speed continuous frame modes and you press the shutter button and it's chugging away taking the images, if it's set to on, it's going to blink on and off between the shots, but the display will intermittently show what you're shooting. If you have it set to off, it's going to blank off and stay off. Now this is, of course, problematic if you're shooting a moving subject like a race car or a bird flying through the air. If you have it set to off, it's just going to blank off and you won't be able to track your subject. If you have it set to on, at least it blinks on intermittently so you could track the subject a little better. So I have it set to on. Flash sync speed, you have a lot of choices here. You could go down to 1/60th of a second or as fast as 1/200th of a second. And you'll see at the very top there's 1/200th of a second auto FP. FP stands for focal plane. It's another way of saying that you're going to be doing high-speed sync. So if you have a flash that is capable of high-speed sync and you want a sync speed faster than 1/200th of a second, make sure the camera is in this auto FP mode. Then you could probably use just about any shutter speed available in the camera, 1/8000th of a second, 1/4000th of a second, and flash, sync your flash to it. Now, of course, the flash has to be high-speed sync capable. Next is flash shutter speed. This is the slowest shutter speed you want to use when you're using a flash. I have it set to 1/60th of a second, but quite often I'm doing some creative shooting with flash where I'm letting the subject get kind of blurred. So then I would set this to like 4 seconds so that I'm using, let's say, a 3-second shutter speed. The flash will work properly the way I expect it to work, at least, when I have that set. So you could set it to whatever the slowest shutter speed you want to use when using flash. Exposure compensation for flash. When you do flash exposure compensation, do you want it to compensate taking the whole frame into account or just the background? Tell you the truth, a lot of times I don't see a difference between these two when I do it, but there is going to be a time when it will give you a different kind of look. So you might want to experiment with this and see what works for you. Auto ISO sensitivity control. When you're in auto ISO mode, do you want it to take into account the subject and the background or just the subject? And there's your choices there. Modeling flash. This is when you hit the preview button on the camera, and we'll talk more about the preview button in a minute. If you have a flash that is capable of emitting a modeling flash, what will happen is when you press in the preview button on the camera, the flash will light up, but not like a flash. It's going to light up like a light bulb and let you see where the shadows are, so you could kind of model your flash to your subject. And that, again, is you could turn it on or off there. Auto bracketing mode, when you're in manual mode, but you're auto bracketing, do you want it to do the flash and the shutter speed, or the flash, shutter speed, and aperture, or just the flash and the aperture, or just the flash power? And I have it set to flash power. Bracketing order, when you're doing a bracket, you have 2 choices. You could have it like I have it set. The underexposed image it gets taken first, then the properly exposed, then the overexposed. Or you could have it so that the properly exposed is first, then the under, then the over. It really doesn't matter, but you have it set to whatever you'd like. If you'd like to customize the eye menu, we'd do that here. So of course in the eye menu you have 12 different options. You could switch any of these 12 to anything you like. So let's say I don't like image quality, or that I don't use image quality. So I could go in here, highlight it, click the OK button, then pick anything I'd like. So I could go through here and find something, you know, like active D-lighting. Click that. Now I switch that to active D-lighting, and then click the back thing and you're done. You're all set. Now, custom control assignment. These are the actual function buttons that are on the camera. And you can see you get a little outline of the camera there. And as you hit the right arrow key, you'll go through all the different function buttons on the camera. And the little drawing of the camera will orient itself and light up the button that we're talking about. And you could switch any of these buttons to anything you like. I mentioned before that when you do a modeling flash that you press in the preview button. By default, I believe it's by default, function 2 is set to the preview button. So that would be the button you would press for your modeling flash. You can, of course, change any of these. Just highlight the one you want to change, click the OK button, then go through the list and pick the one you want it to change to. Very easy to do. So you could change any of those, and you could even change the function button that may be on some of the lenses. And also the focus ring, you could have it not do focus if you want. You could change it to whatever you'd like it to do. Right there. Now next is the OK button. This is the OK button that's on the back of the camera. When you're in shooting mode, when you're taking pictures, do you want it to reset the focus point back to the center? That's what I have it set to right now, but I might change that actually. Or do you want it to zoom in? If you're really critical that you get proper focus, you may prefer to have it zoom on, so you could zoom in really when you press the OK button. You have 3 different magnifications, 50%, 100%, and 200%. So if you're doing some type of macro photography, you may want to just press that OK button, let it zoom in so you could better focus on your subject. And that's when you're in shooting mode. When you're in playback mode, you could have it press in so it zooms into the image you're viewing, or turn the thumbnails on or off, or view the histogram, or choose the folder. You have all those different choices. That's the OK button on the back of the camera. Next is shutter speed and aperture lock. This is so you don't accidentally change a setting. Right now my camera is in aperture priority mode, so I only have aperture lock available to me. If I turn the command dial on my camera, I'll change the aperture of my camera. I could set this to on, and then it will lock that out, so I can't change the aperture anymore. So this is just if you're accidentally hitting aperture and you need to set it and leave it, you would turn this on. If you're in shutter priority mode, aperture lock will be grayed out and shutter speed lock will be active, and I could do that. If I'm in manual mode, they'll both be active, and I could come in there and lock them both out if I'd like to. Next is customize the command dials. There is, of course, 2 command dials on the unit. The back one is the command dial. The front one is the sub-command dial. You could reverse the rotation for exposure compensation, shutter speed, aperture, depending on which one you're using it for. So if you want a reverse rotation, this comes in, I mean, if you find that you're always turning it the wrong way, then don't fight it. Come in here and just reverse the rotation, and you'll find you'll start doing it properly. Do you want to flip-flop the main and sub button for the exposure setting or the autofocus setting? Do you want to, now as far as the menus and playback, do you want them to affect the menus? Like right now, if I turn the command dial, as I am, this is the back dial on the camera, you can see how it's going through each of these 3 choices. Now the sub-command dial, if I spin that, it will actually go back through the menu. So it's going back through the menu. If I go the other way, it's going into the menu. So you could change the behavior of those with menus and playback. And the sub-dial frame advance. If you're in playback mode and you're viewing your images, the front sub-dial, right now I have it set to 10 frames. You could also change it to go to rating and protect and things like that. But what that means, let's say I have 50 images on my camera and I'm viewing them on the back of the camera. If I turn the sub-dial, I'm on image 1, and I click the sub-dial or sub-command dial once, it will go to image 11. If I click it twice, it goes to image 21. So you see how it just jumps 10 images. So you could set that to anything you like. Next is F6, release button to use dial. This is one of my pet peeves about Nikon cameras. So often you have to hold a button in and then spin a dial. And that bugs me. Like you're going to change ISO. You have to hold the ISO button in and then spin the dial. If you set this F6 to on, then you could press the ISO button and let go of it and then spin your dial to set your ISO. And within a few seconds, it just turns off. So the first thing I do whenever I get a Nikon camera is I switch this to on because I hate holding in that button and turning command dials. I prefer pressing the button, letting go, then turning the command dial as I wish. Next is F7, reverse the indicators. The actual indicators is you see them on the back of the camera or through the viewfinder. Do you want them going from minus to plus or plus to minus? I have them going minus to plus. Now we're into the movie menu. Now, do you want to customize the I menu for the movie menu? It's the same exact thing as we did for the photo taking menu or picture menu. You could just come in here and you could choose any one you'd like and then click the OK button and switch it to anything you like, just like that. Next is custom control assignment. These again are the function buttons. When you're in movie mode, you could come in here and change them and you could see how it again highlights all those functions for the different buttons and even the dial that is on some lenses that will have it available for. Next is the OK button. This is the OK button on the back of the camera. Now this is when you're in movie mode. Do you want it to reset the center of the focus point, zoom in? Do you want it to actually do recording of the movies or not do anything? And you have the choices there for the movie mode. Next is the AF speed. When it's auto-focusing and your subject's moving, how fast do you want it to hold focus, slower or faster? Now, if someone is standing still and they're like talking with their hands and maybe bobbing their head a little bit, and you have it set to faster, you may find that your camera is going to be focusing in and out a lot, and that might not be something you want. So you'd want to go slower. On the other hand, if you're taking a movie of a moving subject and you want to stay focused on that moving subject, you want to go faster. So, and then you have the choice of when to apply it, always or only while recording. If you have it set to always, you may use a little more battery power, but you'll be able to preview how it's going to be focusing before you're actually taking the movie. AF tracking sensitivity. So if you're tracking a moving subject and something pops in between you and that subject, how fast do you want it to refocus? Slow or low or high, I should say. So you have the similar setting in the picture taking menu as well. So if you have it set to low, it will tend not to refocus on anything jumping in the frame. It will stay on your subject. If you have it set to high, it's going to try to refocus quicker. The next choice, highlight display, you'll notice is grayed out. These are the zebra stripes that allow you to discern whether or not a part of the frame is blown out. The reason why it's grayed out is because we have another setting set to on, and that setting is in the shooting and display, I believe, section. It's D10, peaking highlights. This is focus peaking. Remember when we're manually focusing, whether or not we want those edges to appear when we're in focus? Well, because I have that set on, then we can't do the zebra stripes. It's one or the other. So if I put this off and then I jump back down to highlight display, you'll now see it's active. So you could have the display pattern, the different zebra striped display patterns. You could choose one. And then the threshold, how these are the actual how bright does it have to be before they appear. I have it set to like 248. You could set it to whatever you'd like. If you'd really want to make sure that nothing even approaches getting blown out, you would want to pick a lower number. If you're not so concerned, you would pick a higher number. And that's everything, finally, in the custom setting menu. We covered everything. In our next video, I'll cover everything in the setup menu. And I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone that watches my videos. I really do appreciate it. If you could do me a favor though, if you could share and like the video, if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel, if you could come over to my websites and visit them and check out what I have to offer there, I'd really appreciate it. Until then, I'll talk to you guys soon.